So, as the title suggests, my boyfriend of almost 6 years recently went to a festival without me. We have spoken throughout our relationship about wanting to go to this one together, as neither of us had ever been to that particular festival and would love to experience it together. But then he only arranged a ticket for himself behind my back and went without me. The ticket purchasing was done through a girl that I'd never met, and this particular festival requires you to sign up, exchange registration details, and all that jazz. So it was pre-planned, months in advance, that she would try and get him a ticket, and he would try for her. But at no point did he also give her my registration details, which he's had for our entire relationship, or discuss this with me at all. He then proceeded to hide the above from me, not mentioning that he had other people trying for a ticket for only him. And when the purchaser was successful, getting tickets for this particular United Kingdom festival is like winning a lottery. He then failed to mention that someone else had bought him his ticket and allowed me to believe that he got through to the payment page and panicked, thus only securing one ticket. I was trying to buy tickets at the same time, but couldn't even load the page due to the volume of people trying for tickets. Over the next 10 or so months, and particularly the week before the festival, I was very upset about it. And the closer to the festival it got, the more upset I became. A few days before the festival, I made him aware of how badly the whole situation has hurt my feelings. And he then came clean about how he secured his ticket, which made me feel even worse, as it meant that he has essentially lied to me for months about it instead of just being honest. I was gobsmacked. While he was at the festival, I received flowers and a postcard saying how bad he feels. And he has apologized since coming back, and apparently it's all good now. Since his return from the festival, I've also found out that the two girls he went to the festival with slept in my tent with him, in their own pods, and he did drugs with them the entire time. He doesn't have his own tent, so borrowed mine for the whole weekend. And despite multiple discussions and conversations via phone and text through the time he was there, he failed to mention this to me. And I think that's super shady, but he's now upset that I don't trust him. I feel so unbelievably angry, hurt, and quite honestly mugged off. And he is acting like everything is okay and fine, and I'm finding myself incapable of even sleeping in the same bed as him. This is not the first glaring instance of selfishness in our relationship, and I'm seriously considering calling it quits over this, as I cannot seem to get past the bitterness and resentment that I'm currently feeling. I find myself constantly snapping at him, not wanting to talk to him, and pretty much avoiding him altogether. I've been sleeping in the spare room since he got back, and I'm seriously considering ending the relationship over this. I don't mind him going to things without me, and we both regularly meet friends or attend nights out without each other present, as we both believe and encourage that having our own lives and interests is healthy. However, the particular festival I'm talking about has been on my bucket list forever, and for the entire 6 years of our relationship, we have talked about experiencing it together. So I think I'm pretty justified in being hurt by all of this. Hurt doesn't even begin to cover it, to be honest. We're attending a wedding in France in a week's time, and I think once we're home, I need to deal with this, whatever that entails. I can't continue to live like this. Basically, I've been made to feel that this isn't really that big a deal and I'm being silly, so I thought I'd ask the Reddit hive mind for some advice and opinions. So, Reddit, how do I move past this? Do I want to? Now, for an update, thank you to most of you for the kind words and for your advice, opinions, and even the comments calling me an idiot. I'll add any further updates as things progress, but it seems that the writing is on the wall here, and I need to make some serious decisions in the next few days. I thought this one was for life, so I'm struggling to say the least. Updates to follow for those of you interested. Thanks again now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Honey, this was premeditated and you know why. Let me let you in on a little secret. Most drugs you get off your nut with at a festival give you a high intimacy drive. There is absolutely no way he didn't premeditate this and have intimacy with those girls. I personally would cancel his ticket to the wedding in France and go alone. And when he realizes his ticket, if canceled, just be like, shoot, sorry, they only had one spare and I took it. Then tell him to be moved out by the time you're back. Comment 2. He went with 2 other women, and drugs were involved. He didn't tell you about them sleeping in your tent. Him going to a festival without you is the least of your issues here. He is a selfish git, by the way. He most likely cheated on you. Why stick around someone who treats you like this? You deserve better. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. So, a lot has happened since my last update, and it's been a pretty rough few days. After the wedding in France, things took a turn for the worse. We had a huge argument on the flight back. I couldn't hold it in any longer and confronted him about everything that had been bothering me. I told him how betrayed I felt, how his actions made me question our entire relationship. He got defensive, saying I was overreacting and that it was just a festival. But it wasn't just about the festival. It was about the lies and the deceit. When we got home, I decided to take a few days off work to clear my head. I stayed with a friend because I couldn't stand being in the same house as him. During this time, I found out through mutual friends that he had been talking to the girl who got him the ticket even after the festival. They had been texting and meeting up for coffee, which he never mentioned to me. This was the final straw for me. I felt like I had been played for a fool. I confronted him about it when I got back home. He tried to downplay it, saying they were just friends and that I was being paranoid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. I asked him to show me their messages, but he refused, saying I was invading his privacy. That was it for me. I told him I couldn't do this anymore and that I needed some space to think about our relationship. He moved out to stay with a friend and I stayed in the house. During this time, I did a lot of soul searching. I thought about all the times he had been selfish and how I'd always been the one to compromise. I realized that I had been putting his needs before mine for far too long. I deserved better than this. A few days later, he came back to talk. He apologized again and said he wanted to make things right. He promised to be more honest and to put more effort into our relationship, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was only saying these things because he didn't want to lose me, not because he genuinely wanted to change. I told him I needed more time to think. He left, and I spent the next few days reflecting on our relationship. I thought about all the good times we had shared, but also all the times he had let me down. I realized that I had been holding on to the idea of what our relationship could be rather than what it actually was. During this time, I also spoke to my family and close friends. They all supported me and said I deserved better. They reminded me of my worth and that I shouldn't settle for someone who didn't value me. This gave me the strength to make a decision. I called him and asked him to meet me at a cafe. I told him that I had made up my mind and that I couldn't continue our relationship. He was devastated and tried to convince me to give him another chance, but I stood my ground. I told him that I needed to focus on myself and that I couldn't keep putting my happiness on hold for him. He left, and I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I knew I had made the right decision, but it was still hard to let go of someone I had spent almost 6 years with. Over the next few days, I started to feel more at peace with my decision. I began to focus on myself and my own happiness. I also started to think about my own past and how it had influenced my relationship. Growing up, I'd always been a people pleaser, always putting others' needs before my own. This had carried over into my relationship, and I realized that I had been sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of keeping the peace. I knew I needed to break this pattern and start putting myself first. I also thought about my ex's past and how it had influenced his behavior. He had always been a bit of a loner and had trouble forming close relationships. I realized that his actions were a result of his own insecurities and fears, but that didn't excuse his behavior. I couldn't keep making excuses for him. As I started to focus on myself, I began to feel more empowered. I started to pursue my own interests and hobbies, things that I had put on hold for the sake of our relationship. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I started to feel more like myself again. But just as I was starting to feel better, I received a message from the girl who had gotten him the ticket. She apologized for her role in everything and said she had no idea about the extent of our relationship. She also revealed that my ex had been seeing someone else behind my back for the past few months. This was a huge blow, and I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I confronted him about it, and he finally admitted to it. He said he had been unhappy in our relationship for a while and had sought comfort in someone else. This was the final nail in the coffin for me. I felt completely betrayed and heartbroken. I decided to cut all ties with him and focus on moving forward. It was hard, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I started to see a therapist to help me process everything and work through my feelings. It was a long and painful journey, but I knew I would come out stronger on the other side. Thank you for reading. Aita for considering divorce. After my husband admitted to an emotional affair with his coworker backstory. This is kind of a long story, but I'm feeling so confused and lost. I'm 27 and my husband is 28. We've been married for almost 2 years, but I've known him for 11 years. Our relationship has always been a little rocky, but it definitely seemed to get worse after I got pregnant and had our son. He's 1 year old now. My husband has been working at his job for a year now, give or take. He's a mechanic. Here's where the long story comes in, LOL. My 1-year-old got a hold of his eye drops we've been using and put them in his mouth. I was unsure if any of the eye drops got into his mouth or if he ingested any. So I immediately called poison control, freaking out. After the call, I texted my husband saying that I was about to have a panic attack, but I was scared to tell him why. I was scared that he would be mad at me for my toddler getting into the eye drops. My husband immediately texts back and says, "I'm not cheating on you. She's just a coworker that gets me Zaza." I'm, of course, confused and wondering what he's fessing up about. So I press more into him and everything unraveled. He confesses to me that he's become friends with his coworker, who is a woman, and that she gets him Zaza, and he buys her snacks/lunch sometimes. He says the only time they text is if it's about Zaza or work-related issues, but he told me he has been deleting all of their texts for over 6 months now, but he's not hiding anything. I'm immediately suspicious of him, because if there was nothing to hide, he wouldn't have to delete any texts. So we keep talking, and he says that she's just a friend. He's not interested in her, and he's not attracted to her. But then tells me that he didn't want to tell me about her, because he knew I'd be insecure, because she's pretty and his type. He says they slowly became friends over the past several months, and that she knows about me and our child. He kept telling me that he's not cheating on me, but he knows that he shouldn't have hidden her or the texts for over 6 months. He kept telling me to text her and get her side of the story. At first, I immediately said no, but then I kept ruminating on it. So I did text her and asked if she had any screenshots of their texts she could share with me. She called me and said that she also has deleted all of the messages with my husband because she doesn't like clutter in her phone and frequently deletes messages. She said I have nothing to worry about. So I guess I'm just wondering, do you think both of them are lying about nothing going on? Does this count as emotional cheating? I'm just feeling so confused, hurt, and stupid. Now for an update. Husband and I hashed it out this evening. He confessed that he's been having an emotional affair, and it's been more than just Zaza and getting her lunch. He said that they have talked about our marriage problems. He's told her things about me, and vice versa, where she's talked about relationship problems to him. She's not dating anyone at the moment, though. He said that they have talked about animals, hobbies, interests, TV shows, etc. He said they have similar personalities and a lot in common. He said he thinks she's pretty, but he's not attracted to her and isn't interested. Said he's just been enjoying the attention, her stroking his ego, and the validation he's gotten. He told me that he had no plans of telling me, so this either would have gone on much longer or it would have gone on until he got another job. I told him we're done and there is no going back from this. I told him that when I'm able to, I'm divorcing him, and he understood. Thank you all for commenting and telling me the obvious. I was just hoping maybe I was wrong. Delusion is one hell of a drug. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, the fact that you feel scared about his reaction to the eye drop situation. The fact that he hid the texts ship for half a year on its own, just not being honest. The fact that he might absolutely be cheating emotionally, if not more. Comment 2, yeah, you need to see those messages. If he has an iPhone, you can recover deleted texts. Be relentless in demanding he find a way to provide them. Him immediately going to that specific scenario is such a red flag. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading my last post. After I told my husband I wanted a divorce, things got even more complicated. The next day, he came home from work and told me he had quit his job. He said he couldn't stand being around his coworker anymore and wanted to prove to me that he was serious about fixing things. I was shocked and didn't know what to say. On one hand, I appreciated the gesture, but on the other, it felt like too little, too late. We spent the next few days barely speaking to each other. I was trying to figure out how to move forward with the divorce while also taking care of our son. My husband, on the other hand, was constantly trying to talk to me, asking for another chance. He even suggested we go to couples therapy, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. One evening while I was putting our son to bed, my husband came into the room and handed me a letter. He said it was from his coworker. I was hesitant to read it, but curiosity got the better of me. In the letter, she apologized for her part in everything and and insisted that nothing physical had ever happened between them. She said she had no romantic feelings for my husband and that she was just trying to be a friend. She also mentioned that she was quitting her job and moving to another city to give us space to heal. Reading the letter made me feel a mix of emotions. I was relieved that she was leaving, but it also made me question if I was overreacting. Maybe it really was just an emotional affair and nothing more. But then I remembered all the lies and deceit, and I knew I couldn't just brush it off. The next day, I decided to take my husband's suggestion and look into couples therapy. I found a therapist who specialized in infidelity and booked an appointment for the following week. I told my husband about it, and he seemed genuinely relieved. He promised to do whatever it took to make things right, but I still had my doubts. As the week went on, I started to notice some changes in my husband. He was more attentive to our son and me, and he seemed to be making an effort to rebuild my trust. He even started doing more around the house, which was a nice change. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all just a temporary fix. One night after our son was asleep, my husband and I sat down to talk. He opened up about his own insecurities and how he felt like he was failing as a husband and father. He admitted that he had been using his coworkers' attention as a way to escape from his problems. Hearing him be so vulnerable made me see him in a different light, but it also made me realize how deep our issues ran. I decided to reach out to my best friend who had been through a similar situation a few years ago. She gave me some tough love and reminded me that I needed to do what was best for me and my son. She also suggested that I take some time for myself to really think about what I wanted. That weekend, I asked my husband to take our son to his parents' house so I could have some time alone. He agreed, and I spent the next 2 days reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about our history, the good times and the bad, and tried to imagine what our future could look like. During that time, I also remembered a conversation I had with my husband early in our relationship. We had talked about our fears and insecurities, and he had confided in me about his parents' tumultuous marriage. His father had cheated on his mother multiple times, and it had left a lasting impact on him. I realized that his actions might have been influenced by his past, but it didn't excuse what he had done. When my husband and son came back, I felt a little more clarity. I told my husband that I was willing to try couples therapy, but I needed him to understand that it was going to be a long and difficult process. He agreed and promised to be patient and supportive. Our first therapy session was intense. The therapist asked us to be completely honest with each other, and it was hard to hear some of the things my husband had to say. He admitted that he had been emotionally checked out of our marriage for a while, and that he had been using his coworker as a way to cope. I shared my own feelings of betrayal and hurt, and it was clear that we had a lot of work to do. Over the next few sessions, we started to dig deeper into our issues. We talked about our communication problems, our insecurities, and our fears. It was exhausting, but it also felt like we were making progress. My husband was starting to understand the impact of his actions, and I was beginning to see that maybe there was a chance for us to rebuild our relationship. But then something happened that tested my husband's true loyalties. One evening, he received a call from his former coworker. She was in town for a few days and wanted to meet up to talk. My husband told me about the call and asked for my opinion. I was torn. On one hand, I wanted to trust him and believe that he could handle the situation maturely. On the other hand, I was terrified that it would reopen old wounds. After a long discussion, we decided that he would meet her, but only if I could come along. He agreed, and we set up a meeting at a local coffee shop. When we arrived, I could see the surprise on her face when she saw me. We sat down, and my husband started the conversation by apologizing for his actions and explaining how much he wanted to make things right with me. She seemed genuinely remorseful and reiterated that she had no romantic feelings for him. As the conversation went on, I started to feel a sense of closure. It was clear that my husband was committed to our marriage and that his former coworker was no longer a threat. We left the coffee shop feeling hopeful, but I knew that we still had a long way to go. Thank you for reading. Aita, for telling my boyfriend to stop outsourcing my thinking and let me make my own decisions. I'm casually dating a guy who is 26 years old and is really smart, loves debating, works hard, has lots of great friends and family, and is pretty successful. He looks for my approval and respect and tries to impress me. He's extremely supportive and encourages me to work harder, strive for more, become healthier, and be a more spiritual person. He inspires me to be more productive, and we both want high-flying careers, a passion/mission/purpose, and goals we're reaching for, and a growth mindset. We seem to bump heads in arguments, however. Here are some examples. 1. We were debating baby unaliving, and even though we are politically on the same side, he wanted to poke my reasoning. It's a touchy topic for me, so I reacted a little defensively when it came up, and he said I should support my position with factual evidence. I can't remember all of the Roe v. Wade journals and legal briefs I read back in 2022, so I started Googling arguments for and against baby unaliving. When I did this, he said I don't trust myself enough to develop an informed viewpoint, and that I outsource my thinking. He also said that the extent of my emotional reaction should be directly proportional to the amount of information I collected about the topic. 2. I was considering buying a new car, on my own, obviously. I know exactly how much I'm willing to spend, what I like, and what my finances look like. We're not at that point yet. When I casually asked his opinion one day, he replied, "Isn't that a decision you should be able to make on your own? Don't you know your own budget and spending habits?" 3. We went out for dinner one night, and the restaurant we wanted to go to was closed. He asked me where I want to go eat, and I was scanning the road we were standing on, trying to remember what restaurants existed. I specifically wanted something casual and indoors, with no waiters, so he could feel comfortable. It was hot outside. And so we could get seated quickly, and he was hungry. Apparently, I was taking too long to make a decision, and he gets angry with me. When we returned home, he told me about a lesson he learned in high school. He once went to a dinner at a country club with very wealthy men where Trump golfs, and he was taking too long to read the menu and choose his entree. The men at the table told him, "We didn't get to be as rich as we are by wasting time making unimportant decisions. Just pick something and move on." He used that story to criticize my decision-making process. I defended my actions by explaining that I was trying to be thoughtful and empathetic towards his needs, which is why I took my time. 4. I tried to show gratitude to make him feel good, appreciated, and masculine. I've always thanked him for little things like calling me in the evening or sending me Uber Eats snacks. Lately, when I thank him for his time or for discussing a relationship issue, he responds with, "Isn't that the bare minimum? Why would you date someone who doesn't do X?" I'd expect a lot more from a partner than just X, which makes me feel bad for saying thank you and as if I have very low standards. In fact, I think he thinks that I have extremely low standards. He often accuses me of willing to keep the relationship going at any cost, even if it's not the right fit, to which I suggest breaking up. But it doesn't happen. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This isn't even being logical, side note. I hate when men pull that card, but that's for another day. Like, none of this is actually about the facts of the argument. It's all about you doing it wrong. He asks you for evidence, then criticizes you for needing sources. He asks for your restaurant recommendation to fit his requests. Then when you can't remember what's in the area, he's mad you can't pick fast enough, even though he is the one with the nitpicky requests. Like, think about it. None of this is even about debating or arguing. It's about how you are wrong. Comment 2. It's normal to get emotional about baby unaliving because it directly affects you. He's severely lacking in empathy if he doesn't understand that. I also think it's silly and a waste of time to poke holes in your argument if you both actually agree. People playing devil's advocate on issues that don't affect them are incredibly annoying. They enjoy feeling superior and logical while ignoring that some of us have very real skin in the game. That doesn't make him smart, it makes him a weenie. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. So a lot has happened this past week, and it's been pretty intense. It all started last Monday when we had another argument. This time, it was about my career choices. I mentioned that I was thinking about switching jobs because I felt like I wasn't growing in my current role. He immediately jumped in, questioning if I had done enough research and if I was just running away from challenges. He said, "You need to be sure you're not just looking for an easy way out." That really stung because I felt like he was undermining my ability to make decisions about my own life. I tried to explain that I had been thinking about this for months, but he just kept pushing back, saying I needed to have a solid plan before making any moves. The next day, I decided to take a break from him and spend some time with my best friend. We went out for coffee and I vented about everything that had been going on. She listened patiently and then said something that really hit me. "It sounds like he's trying to control you, even if he doesn't realize it." That was a huge wake-up call for me. I started to see our arguments in a different light, and it made me question if this relationship was really healthy for me. On Wednesday, I had a meeting with my boss, and we talked about my career goals. She was incredibly supportive and even offered to help me find opportunities within the company that aligned with my interests. I felt so relieved and validated, and it made me realize that I didn't need his approval to make decisions about my own life. Thursday was a turning point. We had another argument, this time about my health. I mentioned that I wanted to start a new workout routine, and he immediately started critiquing my plan, saying it wasn't intense enough and that I needed to push myself harder. I snapped and told him that I didn't need his constant criticism and that I was perfectly capable of making my own decisions. He looked shocked and didn't say anything for a moment. Then he quietly said, "I just want you to be the best version of yourself." That made me pause and think about his intentions. Maybe he wasn't trying to control me. Maybe he genuinely thought he was helping. Friday was a bit pretty tough. I decided to confront him about everything that had been bothering me. I told him how his constant questioning and criticism made me feel like I wasn't good enough. He listened quietly and then said, "I never realized I was making you feel that way. I just wanted to challenge you to be better." We had a long, emotional conversation, and for the first time, I felt like we were really communicating. He admitted that he had a tendency to be overly critical because that's how he motivated himself, and he thought it would work for me too. Over the weekend, we decided to take a break from each other to reflect on our relationship. I spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted and what I needed from a partner. I realized that while I appreciated his support and encouragement, I also needed someone who respected my autonomy and trusted my judgment. I thought about my past relationships and how they had shaped my expectations. I remembered an ex who was incredibly controlling, and I realized that I had been so focused on avoiding that kind of relationship again that I hadn't noticed the more subtle ways in which my current boyfriend was exerting control. On Sunday, we met up to talk about our future. I told him that I needed more space to make my own decisions, and that I wanted him to trust me more. He agreed and said he would work on being less critical and more supportive in a way that didn't undermine my confidence. We both acknowledged that we had a lot of work to do, but we were willing to try. Looking back, I can see that this past week has been a turning point for both of us. We've both learned a lot about ourselves and each other, and while it's been challenging, I think it's brought us closer together. We're both committed to making this relationship work, but we're also aware that it won't be easy. There are still a lot of unresolved issues, and I know we'll have more arguments in the future, but for now, I'm feeling hopeful and more confident in my ability to stand up for myself. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day!